The First World War will be remembered as one of the most devastating conflicts in human life ever to have been experienced. An entire war from the generations earlier would have suffered less casualties than a single battle during the First World War. This is largely due to the European empires being able to sustain such devastation and the modern weaponry employed with their increased killing capacity and mass production. With entire generations of men on both sides of the trenches perishing in terrible conditions, dying in futile assaults, and suffering the worst deprivations, there were battles with millions of deaths, and this is a list of the top 5 most deadly. Number 5. The Battle of Passchendaele. Fought from July until November 1917, with up to 850,000 casualties. The goal of this battle was for the Allies to break through the German defensive line at the village of Passchendaele in Belgium, and outflank and surround the German army. In what is termed a bite-and-hold operation, the Allies intended to wear the Germans down through the attrition of artillery barrages and relentless head-on assaults. This resulted in horrific casualties on both sides, and the Allies only driving the Germans back a short distance. This battle is largely remembered for the senseless waste of life, bad generalship, and the mud. Number 4. The Battle of Verdun. The longest running battle of the First World War, lasting from the 21st of February until the 19th of December 1916. This battle is well known for its brutality and its horrific agenda. The city of Verdun, being a significant cultural town, the German High Command knew that the French would fight committedly to retain it. The formal objective of this battle was to capture the city, but the real plan was to force the French into an unnecessary diversionary battle and simply kill and wound as many French soldiers as possible. In the words of General Erich von Falkenhayn, the plan was to bleed the French white until they surrendered. It was believed that the high casualty rate would break the French morale and force the government into surrender. By the end of the battle, with no ground being taken or lost, the French had suffered nearly 550,000 men, with the Germans losing 450,000. Number 3. The Battle of the Somme. Well known to the British as a prime example of a senseless slaughter during the First World War, this was the first battle to involve high amounts of battle tanks and military aircraft in one of the largest assaults during the war. With intentions to break the German army and hasten an Allied victory, it only resulted in gaining 10 kilometers of land at the cost of over 1 million casualties. The British prepared for this battle with a gigantic several-day artillery barrage on the German lines to soften resistance. On the first day of the assault, this was proven ineffective, with the British suffering 60,000 men dying on a single day. Having gained almost nothing, the offensive finally ended on the 13th of November 1916, with over 650,000 men dying on the Allied side and 600,000 on the German. Number 2. The Spring Offensive. With Russia dropping out of the war, the Germans were able to move millions of veterans from the east to the west. They were now outnumbering the Allies on the Western Front. The German High Command, knowing the Americans and their resources were soon to be landing in Europe and bringing the final German defeat with them, the last German hope for victory was launched. Starting on the 21st of March 1918 with an incredible bombardment, the German army, led by a new soldier on the battlefield, the shock trooper, stormed forward into Allied Europe. They advanced rapidly, heading directly for Paris, hoping to end the war before the Americans arrive. However, moving so rapidly, supplies and artillery were unable to keep pace with the fast-moving infantry, and the offensive slowly petered out, with over 1.5 million casualties suffered on both sides. Number 1. The 100 Days Offensive. With the failure of the German Spring Offensive, the German army was left in a far weakened position, still far outstripping their proper supplies and artillery positions, on grounds they were unable to defend. Having lost most of their experienced soldiers in the original offensive, now left with less proficient reserves, their position was untenable. The Allies were battered, but not broken. With the Americans landing in France, now hundreds of thousands of fresh, well-equipped soldiers poured into the Allied ranks. Defeat for the Germans was inevitable, and the Allied High Command decided to go on the offensive. Reopening several battles along the German-French line, such as the Second Somme, Nyons, and Arras, the Germans weren't able to hold out, and they were broken. Forced to retreat to the Hindenburg Line, the Germans were on the run. The weakened and demoralized German army was unable to cope with the now reinvigorated Allies, who rapidly broke through the Hindenburg Line at the Battle of Cambrai. With defeat inevitable and only more deaths to be lost, the Central Powers finally sued for peace and the war was finally over. Although the Allies had succeeded with the 100 Days Offensive, nearly 2 million men had perished within 100 days.